Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Boost, your weekly dose of motivation and inspiration. I am your host, Lisa Maynard-Atem, and I'm also the Managing Director of the Black United Representation Network. Today, I am really delighted and excited to welcome Gamal Fahnbulleh as our guest. As you all know, Gamal is an established journalist and presenter, and no doubt you've seen him on ITV News and Granada Reports. So without further ado, welcome, Gamal. Welcome to The Boost. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much for the invite. I'm always happy to chat and share my experiences, so it's great to be aboard.
Oh, thank you so much for joining. I was really excited when you said, oh yeah, you'd be happy to do it. I was really excited. And I must say as well, I think you made your debut on the news at 10 a few weeks ago, and me and my mum were so excited when we saw you. It's just really nice that, I think in terms of more diversity and representation, I'm seeing more people that look like me in occupying certain spaces, and it's just so nice and refreshing to see. So that was a really exciting moment for me and my mum. So anyway, let's kick off with the questions. So first up, tell us about the early years of Gamal. Where did it all start?
Where did it all start? I mean, how far back do you want to go? So I was actually born in West Africa. But my family, we moved over to the UK in 1985. We moved to London initially, and between the years of 3, 4, 5 and 18, I kind of lived in between London and Somerset, actually, in a little town called Taunton. But then I went to university in Manchester, and really for me, I guess that's where it really all started. I always say that I'm an adopted Northerner because I came here in 2000. Absolutely fell in love with the city of Manchester. It's one of those, it's strange, I look back, and when, you do these open days when you go up to the, various cities with your parents and things. And I came up with my mum and dad, and, I'll never forget the day because, we got there and they take away the parents, they put them in one room, all the, potential students, they put them in another room. And we all came out at the end, after an hour discussion and stuff. My parents were like, yeah, Gamal, the academics really good and all this, all that. And for me, I was just looking around, it's like, oh my God, this city is just like an explosion of diversity and multiculturalism in the university campus. Everyone is kind of really cool, but also really different as well. And I just thought, this is exactly the place that I want to be in. This is a place that I want to, continue to grow in and develop and evolve and all of that. So really between 18 and I'm 39, 40 next year, I've more or less lived in the Northwest. In between those years, I've kind of spent time, periods of time in London, but in the main, I've kind of been in the Northwest. I've kind of been in Manchester, and my wife is from Preston, just down the road. My little boy was born in Stepping Hill Hospital in Stockport, so that's why I always say to people that I'm proudly an adopted Northerner.
Yeah,
and so essentially that's kind of where it all started, really.
Amazing. I must admit, Manchester, I think for me, Manchester got voted the third best city in the world, very recently, and I'm thinking it should be first, I think, personally, because I've lived all over the world. So I've lived in New York, I've lived in Cameroon, I've lived in Tokyo, because I did a lot of traveling with my family when I was young. And for me, I think Manchester's it's just the best city. I lived in London for nearly 8 years and moved back about 4 years ago. And it's definitely one of the best decisions I've ever made. I love this city so much.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I always say, that, London is probably my hometown. That's kind of where I spent my, very, early years. And most of my family are in London. And it's an amazing city, probably
definitely
on earth, hands down. And I still get that little, oh, I'm in London, how cool is this?
Yeah.
But Manchester's my home now.
Yeah.
They always say to people, who are down in places like London that, Manchester's got everything that London's got. It's just easier to get around. You can walk from one side of the city to the other side of the city, easily, in an afternoon, which is very different to what you have down in the big smoke.
Yeah, it's definitely a great place. So moving on, can you give us some background on how your journey into journalism began?
Yeah, sure. So, when you talk to a lot of people about, how they got into journalism, many will say it's something that they always wanted to do. There was something inside them that they, had a really inquisitive mind, that they just had a passion for it. And for me, it was slightly different. So I had always initially planned to go into policy. I did a politics and history degree. And for me, you know, I kind of wanted to come up with sort of policy ideas and, you know, and be involved in the discussion about, you know, the 21st century and how this country sort of moves on and develops, and, you know, in kind of very, you know, different sort of policy areas. But it was after university, I actually worked for a couple of political think tanks. One of them was a really small political think tank called the Commonwealth Policy Studies Unit, which kind of looked at, you know, policy ideas and the policy agenda for the Commonwealth of Nations, and how that can evolve, and how that can, you know, move into the 21st century and its relevancy, and questions about its relevancy. And I worked at another think tank called Chatham House in the Africa department, and it was at that time that I actually came into contact with just a lot of different journalists from different parts of the world, all coming into these, you know, think tanks, these like academic arenas, and talking about their experiences and sharing their experiences. And for me, I was just blown away, you know, having that ability to go to far-flung places in the world, or in your country, in your region, wherever it may be, and having that ability to be able to tell stories and inform people, and, you know, having the privilege of being able to, you know, tell stories about people who may not have that ability, that capacity to speak for themselves, to have their voice. And for me, that just blew me away. And that was when I was like, yeah, this is absolutely, you know, what I want to do. Because, you know, we all know what it's like when you're at a certain age, you're kind of weighing up your strengths and you're weighing up your weaknesses. Like, what am I good at? You know, what am I not so good at? What can I improve on? And when I kind of like put everything down on a bit of paper, I was like, journalism, you know, that is the area that I want to go into. And, you know, I've got a very strong-willed West African mother. And from day dot, she was just like, you know, Gamal, you get to use your voice. You know, you've got to use your voice. You've got to use your voice, stuff like that. You know, think about an industry where you can use, you know, what you've been blessed with. You know, so the stars aligned in many ways. And I decided that, yeah, journalism is absolutely for me. So I applied to do what it was a postgraduate diploma in broadcast journalism. So I did that at one of the universities in London that offer that course. It was City University. And whilst I was applying, our course director sent all the students, all the applicants, an email essentially saying, look, ITV are offering this scheme. If you are going to do this course, we advise you all to apply for it, because it's a really good scheme. And essentially what it was that ITV would help me with my tuition for that course. Right. And then most importantly, they would give me a 6-month attachment to a regional newsroom. So I applied for it, and you had the choice you had the option to select the region that you wanted to go to. A lot of people choose London because there is almost like misconception that, you know, all roads lead to London. But because I knew the Northwest, because I knew Manchester, I was like, Granada, you know, and I'd watch the output from time to time as a student, not all the time, but from time to time. So I kind of knew that it was, you know, a really good, professional, awesome output. So I applied, and I think there are about sort of 400 applicants. There are only 10 places, and I was lucky enough to be one of the 10 that got the place. And the rest is history, really. I got my attachment with Granada. I spent 4 years at Granada, and then, you know, I decided to try something new, to move on to network. I worked at Sky News, Good Morning Britain. I came back to Sky News as a reporter at Sky. And then I went into presentation probably about 7 years ago. And yeah, for 7 years, I was a presenter at Sky. And then, you know, the opportunity, because I was always living in the Northwest. So I split my time between London and Manchester. You know, my life, my wife, and then my little boy, they were in Stockport, and I was working in London, you know, so it's quite a tough few years. But then this opportunity came up at Granada, and, you know, it's the newsroom that I knew. A lot of the old faces are still there. Like I said, it's a very good, slick output. And it's an output that really cares about its viewers and really cares about stories that matter to our viewers. So, you know, I applied for the job, and the rest is history.
Oh, fantastic. It's interesting what you were saying about your mum. My mum is West Indian, so my mum is Bajan, but she's of a very similar mindset. She always says to my sister and I, you know, you have a skill. It's important that you don't just use those skills for yourself, but you use them for the good of others as well. So she always pushed us to make sure that, you know, as much as we do well for ourselves, make sure we pay that forward and help others. So yeah, it's really interesting. And in terms of what you're saying about Granada, you know, in terms of Burn, you know, from day one, from when we set the organization up last year, you know, Granada have been so supportive, absolutely fantastic support we've had. So yeah, they've been amazing. So yeah, I'm a bit jealous that you get to work there every day and I don't. So next question, what are some of the challenges you faced and how have you overcome them?
I think in terms of sort of challenges that I faced, a lot of them have been actually quite sort of like personal. And what I mean is that sort of challenges within myself. You know, for a long time, I mean, you know, imposter syndrome is real.
Yes.
You know, and for a long time, you know, I've always questioned my ability. You know, I'm my biggest critic, and I'm really self-critical even now. You know, I will watch, you know, the program that's just gone out, and I will kind of look at myself and I will dissect, you know, my performance. If I've gone out reporting and filming, I'll look at the sort of report that I've done and I'll go over and over and over again. And for a long time, I've always been really kind of sort of, you know, challenging of myself and questioning, you know, whether I should be doing what I'm doing, you know, and finding my inner voice and finding that belief in myself, you know, has been one of the biggest improvements in my overall sort of journalism.
Yeah.
So in terms of challenges, I would say that is that number one thing is that, you know, that constant doubts, that constant questioning of myself. As my career progressed and I was, you know, on a trajectory and heading in the right direction and, you know, ticking all these boxes, you know, as my career was progressing and stuff. And even now, you know, as the main presenter of Granada Reports, I'm really self-critical, you know, and I think there's a lot of positives in that. But also at the same time, sometimes, you know, I do need to just like let go and say, breathe, you know, enjoy the moment, look where you are, you know. And I think, you know, a lot of people can probably sort of empathize with that kind of feeling of imposter syndrome. But it's just about finding it within yourself that, you know, you are good, you are talented, you've got that ability within yourself, you know, now go off and show other people.
Yeah, I'm the same, I must admit. So I am very new to the role of managing director. It's not a role I've done before. And like you say, I am extremely critical of myself. I find fault with everything I do. Like I'm never happy. And I've got to a point now where it's like I have to kind of, like you say, I have to back off from myself. It's like, right, okay, you've done the absolute best you can do, Lisa. It's good enough. But yeah, it's something I struggle with daily. I'm constantly looking at like I'll probably go back and watch this and think, right, you could have done that a bit better. You could have maybe asked that question a little bit better. But it's like you say, it's just a continuous journey, isn't it? And just working on yourself and knowing that you're enough and that you do have the ability and the position that you're in, you've actually earned the right to be there. But yeah, it definitely takes time to get past that.
And also, you know, I struggle not being busy. You know, I've got a day, you know, where it feels like I'm not that busy or I'm not up to much. I get very twitchy and get very, you know, angsty and very anxious. And, you know, I think maybe perhaps is because I've always had it stomped in me that, you know, we've always got to work hard. We've always got to push ourselves.
Yes.
Okay? And even now, like sometimes, again, you know, if I have a quiet day where, you know, we're doing the program and I'm not kind of pre-filming or setting up interviews or, you know, being involved in discussions like this, that's okay. You know, that's okay.
Yeah, it is. It's fine. I think many people, not just yourself or myself, we just need to learn to be a bit less critical of ourselves and a bit more appreciative of our own abilities and skills. So moving on to the next question. So the 25th of May last year was obviously a day that has forever changed history due to the horrendous murder of George Floyd. You know, many Black people, myself included, you know, have felt a sense of exhaustion in terms of the time it's taken for the injustices that we have suffered as a people to be seen. How have the events of that day affected you?
I think, firstly, what I'll say that it, you know, like everybody, you know, that we will know, it was horrific and it was harrowing and it was moving. And, I watched the full video once, and it took me a long time to watch the full video again. Even as a journalist, when you're covering the story, it was so sad, and it made me so angry, because I'm sure we can all agree, you know, looking at that police officer's face, it was just that the sense of entitlement, you know, and the helplessness of all those people around him, you know. And, you know, I'm a firm believer in, like, you know, as a society, you know, we're really kind of sort of moving forward, and we're seeing a lot of changes for the positive. There's still a hell of a lot of work to do. But I think I've said this before, that if we go back 50 years, I would not be doing what I'm doing now. Most of us can agree on that.
Yeah.
Okay? And when I was a rookie journalist, when I was very starting off, the only person who really looked like me, who was off profile in our industry, was Trevor McDonald.
Yeah.
You know, somebody who was how many decades older than me at the time. You know, so there's a lot of work that has been done behind the scenes, you know, for us to take that to move forward, you know. And I do think that we are having more and more discussions, and I think we would have had these discussions anyway, but I think what George Floyd did, that was a catalyst. And I think for a lot of people, you know, the frustrations that they felt, and elements of, you know, some people might even go as far to say sort of gaslighting that they may have experienced, you know, that just all came out like a rush, you know. And I think for a lot of people, and, you know, I can't speak for other people, you know, but it's about lived experience. And it's about, all you want is for somebody to understand. Yeah. And I think that applies to whether it's race, whether it's, you know, like sexual orientation, you know, whether you're a victim of misogyny in the workplace. You want people to understand, you want people to get it, and you want it to stop. You know, and I kind of feel that what George Floyd did was that it just gave people this collective, this is what we're talking about. Yeah. You know, and you've got elements, you've got extremes. Obviously, George Floyd was a massive extreme, you know, and then right at the end of the scale, it could be, you know, very minuscule in comparison, your experience perhaps in the workplace or in another type of environment, but it's a lived experience.
Yes.
And I think what George Floyd allowed people to do was to say, right, it's time now for us to have this discussion, which is important.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think for me, like I say, I found the whole thing, it was very harrowing, it was very distressing. But I think what it did was it gave me a kind of renewed purpose in terms of speaking up. Like, I mean, I always spoke up for things before, but now it's like, you know, I do think that for me, that was a moment where you have to pick a side. Like, you can no longer just be silent. If you see something happening that's wrong, regardless of whether it's about race, gender, sexuality, religion, you have to speak up. And I think, like you say, that the murder of George Floyd, horrendous as it was, I do think it's given us like an opportunity to do that. Because I know so many people now who they'll see something happening. Like my friend, he had somebody there was an incident at work, and it wasn't him, it was his colleague. And he said, I just couldn't sit there, Lisa, and not say something. It's just like, with everything that's happened in the last 16, 17 months, he said it would be wrong of me to see something happening, know it's wrong, and not challenge it. And he just had to go and say something. And he probably would never have done that a year, 2 years previous. But now it's like, with everything that's happened, he's like, I can't just sit idly by and watch something that I know is wrong continue to happen. I just think it's interesting because a lot of people are kind of on that kind of wavelength now, which I think is a good thing, because it means that, you know, change happens at the point of action. And if people are willing to act, hopefully that will bring about positive consequences. I
mean, you know, I've written a couple of articles about it in the past about, you know, the discussion about race, you know, and like just fundamentally, you know, you've got to be anti-racist.
Yes.
You know, you've got to be so vocal about it, and you've got to call it out wherever you see it. And that applies to, you know, if you're black, white, Asian, you know, it doesn't matter. If you see racism, you have to call it out. You know, you've got to be really active about it. You can't just be like, well, look, I know I'm not racist, you know, and just let it, and if you see it, not do anything about it, because you know in yourself that you're not a racist person.
Yeah.
Like, hang on a minute, that's not cool.
Yeah.
Right? And call it out and root it out.
Yeah.
You know, there are other aspects in our life, in our world, rightly so, that people are like, that's, you know, we don't accept that in society, in our culture. You know, it should be exactly the same with race.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think, yeah, definitely. It's not enough to say, oh, well, I'm not a racist. You've got to actively, you know, be anti-racist. I think nothing else will do, especially now. I think with the world with the state that it's in, on so many levels, it's just not enough to say, oh, well, you know, I'm not a racist. Well, yeah, you're not a racist. I'm not saying that you are, but actually, how are you actually challenging, you know, racist incidents and, you know, experiences of people of color? So no, I agree with you 150%. Definitely. Next question is, we're seeing far greater representation on our screens, especially from ITV. How does it feel knowing that you are not only making history, but you're paving the way for others to follow? Because we're seeing enormous amounts of representation on television, and I think it's fantastic. I don't know if you saw Channel 4 the other day, where it was just dedicated to Black programs and Black people, and I was like, I'm just hoping that they make it a more regular thing. It's just fantastic to see. So how do you feel knowing that, you know, you are in effect making history and you're paving the way for other people that look like you to walk in the shoes that you're currently walking in?
I mean, it's great, you know, and I've always believed that it's up to, well, my generation to make it that bit easier for the next group who are coming through. You know, it's all about kind of nurturing talent and making sure, you know, these youngsters who want to come into my profession, for example, have that self-belief and that we can sort of nurture and bring on their talent. So, you know, it's great. And it's awesome to see, you know, the change, because the change is tangible, like you can see it. I think what's really important is that we need to kind of recognize and realize that changing on screens, that's almost the easy part, because there are a lot of talented people right across the board who can be on-screen correspondents, you know, presenters, you know, documentary makers, whatever. You know, the real key are those who are making the decisions, those who are behind the scenes, those who are the program editors, those who are the commissioning editors. Yes. You know, and what we need to do in our industry is to make sure we bring in this talent, and it's not straight, oh, I want to be a presenter. That's great. You know, it's, do you know what? I want to be the commissioning editor of Channel 4.
Yeah.
I want to be the commissioning, you know, editor of BBC. You know, and that is when you'll see the real change, because, you know, the stories that you cover, you know, will be different, and it's all just making us richer. It's all just making us richer, you know, because you can't just say, you know, our viewers are this demographic, you know, this age, this color, tend to be this gender. You know, that's our viewers are people who live on this patch. We want to get as many viewers as we possibly can, you know, and if you have diversity in the workplace, then you're more likely to kind of cover stories that matter to everyone. Yeah. It's simple, you know. So I think it's really good. It's really positive, and I'm so happy, and I feel so privileged to be, you know, playing my part. But fundamentally, the change, you know, we've still got a lot of work to do, and I think we need to get to that point where, you know, you've got people based on their abilities and their talents who are behind the scenes and making the decisions. That's when you'll see real change.
Yeah. I think that, you know, having someone like yourself, and you know, and others like you on TV, and just being able to see somebody that looks like you, it makes such a massive difference. I remember, I think it was, I don't know if it was earlier this year or last year, when Loose Women, and they had the first panel that was entirely Black, and I just remember my mum watching it, and my mum was actually crying, because she's, you know, it's just so amazing to see. And that might not seem like a big thing to a lot of people, but to me, to see a group of Black women on a show, on a daytime show, it was just such a huge thing. And I really love to see it. And I think, like I said before, you know, ITV, especially like Granada reports and programs like that, you know, you are seeing a lot more diversity, you are seeing a lot more inclusion, and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. And also, you know, it's kind of like, you know, laboring the point to, you know, sort of pockets of society that it's fine, you know, it's fine, you know, that you have, you know, more Black people, more Asian people on screen. You know, if I go back to when I was at Sky News a few years ago, and I was put on a breakfast shift with another presenter who was Black, and it was amazing. Some of the reaction, well, I say it's amazing. you know, some may say not surprising, some of the reaction that we got, that there was kind of some conspiracy from up on high.
Yeah.
And actually, it was two competent presenters who were just shifted, rostered on the same day.
Yeah.
Simple. You know, that was all it was. There was no kind of conspiracy that we need to have Gamal and this other black presenter on together. It's just like, well, no, you know, we've got the breakfast program. You know, these are the presenters who are available. Let's put our these two presenters on together. That was it. No conspiracy. But some of the reaction that we got was like, you know, what is this? Is this Africa TV? You know, too many black people. You know, and it's like, well, hang on a minute. You know, 9 times out of 10, the presenters that you see, you know, will be two white presenters sat next to each other. So what is the issue?
Yeah.
And that's what I mean, that there's a lot of work to do within the industry and within society itself. But, you know, I keep on saying, you know, we're definitely heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, there is a lot of work to do, but it's, you know, we're starting to see change happen. It's not all the change we want to see, but, you know, we're making a start, and I think that's fantastic. I think that's a really good thing. So next question. So I would say that you have a very friendly style and approach when it comes to the news. And what I was wondering was, is it important to you that your style speaks to those who may not always feel like they can be an active part or participants in the conversations that matter? Because I know, especially from a regional perspective, because I know that when I was younger and I used to watch the news, I didn't always feel like the news spoke to me, if that made sense. Whereas now I actually feel like I could be more of a participant in those conversations. And I think the way that the news is delivered and shared, I do think that's played a massive part in that. Like even my mum, you know, my mum is much more vocal about things, whereas before she'd kind of just watch the news, she'd absorb it, and that would be the end of it. Whereas now she'll watch a piece on Granada Reports and she'll have her own little commentary or opinion on it. And I think that's really interesting. So, you know, is it important to you that the people that are watching kind of feel included in those conversations and feel like they can be active participants in those conversations?
Massively, because I think especially with regional news, you know, we are of the region, we are part of the region, you know, and I think, you know, often with a network is like, you know, this is news, this is kind of what is going on, and you're kind of sort of looking at international news and, you know, national news, and, you know, there can sometimes be a bit of a disconnect. You know, if you're, I know, living in London, for example, you know, you might not feel so much of a connection for the story that's happening up in Scotland, you know, for example. But I think, you know, in the regional news, like, it's a lot more close knit. And, you know, I think our job, the importance of our, you know, what we need to do is to think about the viewer and connect with our viewers. And it's not just like, this is what's happening today. It's like, it's a privilege to be doing what we're doing. And it's a privilege for our viewers every day, Monday to Friday, 6 o'clock, to put Granada Reports on. You know, they don't have to do that, you know, especially now in this digital age with Netflix and Amazon Prime or iPlayer or whatever it may be. You know, they don't have to do that, you know, so it's up to us to make sure that we really connect with our viewers. And, you know, at the top of the program, it's harder news, it's serious news, and we have to kind of take that, you know, we've got to be authoritative and all that kind of stuff. But you can still be authoritative, but kind of be relaxed about it, you know, and then when you go down the running order, then, you know, you get the opportunity to kind of really kind of relax into it and have a bit of fun with it, you know, because we are part of the region, you know, and we build up a relationship. You know, the role that I'm in, you know, you do it for a number of years. If you look at how many years Lucy Meacock has been in the role, you know, and there are people who've literally grown up with her.
Yeah, me, I love Lucy Meacock. I literally I absolutely think she's amazing.
She's great, you know, and so, you know, we don't take that, you know, lightly. Yeah. We don't take that responsibility, you know, lightly, because they've got the option to flick it over to BBC and watch Northwest Tonight if they want to, or put something on Netflix on. Yeah. You know, it's really, really up to us that we do connect with our viewers. And it's not just kind of like reading an auto cue, you know, like reading an auto cue is the easy bit. You've almost got to go beyond the auto cue. You know, like you're actually going into somebody's living room, you know, or somebody's bedroom, and you're actually talking to them about what is going on in the day. And that's a real skill. And not everybody can do it. And there are some people who can try and do it for years, and they just haven't got that ability. Yes. And some people it just comes naturally, you know. But it's a really, you know, it can be quite a tough exercise, but it's making sure that every day you're coming into work thinking that, how am I going to connect with our viewers? Like looking beyond your skew, that I'm chatting to your mum, for example, and explaining why a story in the reports that we do is important and matters to her and the rest of the region.
I think you and your colleagues, I think you do a great job of connecting with the audience. So yeah, we always enjoy watching. So, so what's next for Gamal? Do you have any exciting projects in the pipeline that you can share with us, even if it's just a hint? It'd be really interesting to know.
So I mean, so I started at Granada in January, and I had a really busy 6 months. So I did a series on child poverty. I did quite a lot of outside broadcasts and stuff, like kind of looking at lockdown and coronavirus and things. So like now, as I look towards the end of the year, I'm really keen on doing something on Armistice Day, and just taking another sort of angle on it. We always cover the story, rightly so, but I think we struggle to find people of different backgrounds to tell their story. So I'm actually looking for people who have served in the armed forces, people of color who have served in the armed forces, to learn from their experiences and all that. So that's kind of what I'm working on at the moment. That's a lot of projects of mine right now. And then long term, we'll see. I'm doing, you said you saw me on national news and stuff. I'm doing a little bit of that, which is great, and it's great for Granada as well to have their presenter on network news. So I'm kind of sort of doing that, and working on that Armistice Day piece. So that's kind of what's in the near future, I'd say.
Oh, fantastic. Well, if we can do anything to help with the Armistice piece or anything else, just give me a shout. Be more than happy to kind of put that out to our networks and see if we can find anyone that we can put forward for you. So yeah, definitely we'll do that. We'll do that on our social media platforms and on LinkedIn and everything. So we'll get that out there. So final question from me. What are your top pieces of advice for anyone wanting to follow in your footsteps?
So I would say, well, let's go back to what I said at the start. You've got to find your inner voice, and you've got to find that self-belief, because if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else is going to believe in you. And that is easier said than done, but it's really, really important that as your career develops, you've got to find your voice. And I always say to kind of sort of your rookie journalists and youngsters, when they go into editorial meetings and things, if they've got an idea, just say it. And we all know what it's like. You're starting in a new job, you're in a meeting, all the bigwigs are there, and people are chatting, and you kind of want to say it, but you don't have it in yourself. You almost can feel like your heart beating and things like that. In our line of work, nobody has a monopoly on ideas. And if you've got a new idea, if you've got a new way to tell a story, if you've got a new way to treat a story, news editors will bite your hand off. So find that self-belief, find that confidence, and just say it. No one's going to think, can't believe Gamal came out with that, in the morning meeting. People will be like, if anything, they'll be like, that was a really good idea. So you've got to find that self-belief, because especially the industry that we're in, and when you're on screen, you've got to develop quite a thick skin. There's always going to be critics. There's always going to be somebody who, and the women journalists, have it really, really tough in our line of work. These are excellent reporters, correspondents, and presenters, and somebody will email in about how their hair's looking, and you're like, what the hell? So you've got to find that self-belief and just, do you know what? It's just noise. And just crack on with what you're doing. And a bit of practical advice, I would say, if you want to be a journalist, build your contact space, because every day you're starting afresh, you're in the morning meetings, these are the stories that we're going to cover today, how we're going to cover it. And if you can go into the meeting and go, well, I've got this contact, so I spoke to this person, the other day, and they're a really good talker, they've got really strong views, boom, that's a big tick next to your name. And I think professionally as well, if you're in an organization or you're trying to get into an organization, do not be afraid to drop somebody a line, to drop somebody an email who is like a top executive or senior manager or whatever. The worst that they can say to you is no, not interested or whatever. That is the worst thing that's going to happen. The best thing that's going to happen, be like, well, look, really great, you know, really appreciate you touching base. Really like your CV, you know, or really like your show reel. Come in, let's have a chat, let's have a coffee. They might not be able to offer you a job, but at least, you know, you're in their minds, and at least you're in their thoughts, and you've kind of shown that that bravery, and you've shown that willingness, as you know, you have to be a journalist, to actually cold call somebody. You know, it's, I keep on saying it, the worst that's going to happen is that either they don't get back to you or they say no.
Yeah.
So what? The best that's going to happen is that they'll bring you in, and you'll and your career. And that's kind of what I did all through my career. You know, I made contacts, and I kept those contacts, and I cultivated the relationship with people. And even when you move on to another organization, you know, don't just turn your back on the place that you just left.
Definitely not.
Always leave on good terms.
Yeah, definitely.
If you've got a manager who invests in, you know, who's invested in you, giving you opportunities, make sure you keep in contact with them, and just keep them up to date with how you're doing, because they will want to see you flourish. They want to see you develop.
Yeah.
You know? And they might point you in the direction for another role that might come up in the future. You know, so those are the two fundamentals for me, you know, self-belief and contacts. And that's not just in journalism, it's right across the board.
Yeah, definitely. Like I used to work for Harrods. I worked for them for about 7.5 years, and I left probably over 4 years ago now, and I still have good relationships with them, because, like I say, it's good to maintain those relationships, but you never know where it might lead. So yeah, I think I agree with you on both, but definitely on the contacts thing, that's so vital. And like I say, it goes beyond journalism. It's any field, it's any industry. So no, I think that's great advice. But anyway, all that remains for me to say is thank you so much for joining us today, Gamal. It's been brilliant. It's been fantastic. And I hope you'll come on and be a guest in